on in. All right, for all of you who have arrived and are in place, we're going to get started, and we know people will stream in as they can. Good morning. Thank you for being here. We're back. It's been 3 years since we did this. And I won't even mention 4 years ago, well, I think it was 4 years ago when we got canceled due to snow. So how lucky are we? The sun is going to shine on us. We get to be here in person. We get to advocate using our voices and our presence. And we get to meet our neighbors. So thank you. Thank you for being here. My name's Elise DeGoyer. I am the Executive Director of Faith Action Network. And this is my, thank you. I think this is my 10th IFAD here. So we're a little like, how do we do this? And we remembered. You are here from Bellingham, a carpool from Bellingham, couple different carpools from Vancouver, East Wenatchee. First time I remember East Wenatchee carpooling here, awesome. And Yakima, we have people from, and all along the I-5 corridor. We are stronger in numbers. Thank you for being here. A couple facility notes. Pastor Laura from the United Churches of Olympia couldn't be here today, so I get to tell you where the bathrooms are. The bathrooms are on both floors. On this floor, they are male-female bathrooms. On the lower floor, they're gender-neutral bathrooms. If you haven't been here before, you need to know that to go between this floor and the lower floor, there's no elevator, so there's some steps in the hallway, or you have to exit the building, go around, follow the sidewalk to the lower area. We're only really using the bathrooms and the social hall downstairs, so most everything is up here. But just so you know that. Lunch, everybody wants to know about lunch, right? Lunch is gonna arrive at 11:15. It's gonna be out on this floor, out in the middle of the registration area. So, being back together after 3 years in person, it really matters, doesn't it? It matters to say hello and give hugs and remember each other and welcome in new people. So let's always welcome the people for who is this your first time at IFAD? Welcome to you. Thank you. If you ever have questions, please ask any of us. I don't know, I was going to say any of us in orange scarves, but no, ask anyone, and we'll try to find you what you need. One thing I want to mention, we're going to talk a little bit later about the agenda, and we send it out by email to you, but the thing I want to talk about is our photo op at 12:15 to 12:30. I know some of you have appointments, not too many, but I really hope you'll make a point to come over to the legislative building and stand on the steps with us. And here's why. We did that for the first time in 2020. And I tell you, I looked at those pictures through the COVID, and it just heartened me so much to say, that's what we can be when we come back together. You know, when we were just looking at Zoom screens, we remembered our time on the steps. So let's remember our time on the steps, and if you can make it over there, 12:15 to 12:30, our friend Mark White, photographer, is going to be with us today taking pictures. If you don't want your picture taken, tell him, but we love to see you, our network, the network in action. So I want to acknowledge and thank, first of all, our staff who've been working super hard, really hard to get this to happen again. So Blake, we may not have Blake up front here because Blake is handling all the registration. We thank Blake for being with us and for his first IFAD. Kristen, you'll hear from later, our policy engagement manager, doing great work here in Olympia. Jess, Elizabeth, and Eric, you will hear from in a few minutes about how the day will flow. And Trevor, I never want to forget Trevor. Where are you? Trevor is our volunteer lobbyist. He's only been doing it 2 days a week as a volunteer for 16 years or so. So, where is I think he's out there, or maybe he's gone to an appointment. So if you see Trevor, please thank him for us. And he's just great eyes and ears on the ground here in Olympia. I also want to thank our board members who are here with us, and I might forget somebody, but because I just saw somebody else I didn't know. Oh, Trevor, there's Trevor. Just in case you have a question for Trevor, that's who he is. I said you'd been here a couple years, 16, but who's counting? Great. Our board members, Reverend Carol Jensen, can you stand and just wave? Carol has been our board chair for all of the time of FAN, 11 years now. And the cool thing about Carol is she's going to go over at 10 o'clock to the house, and she's going to open the house with prayer this morning on our behalf. So we get a shout out over in the House chamber, and she gets to tell them that you're all coming for them. So thank you, Carol. And Carolyn Stevens, there she is. Carolyn Stevens, our treasurer. Nigel Tabor Hamilton, our secretary, is here. And Anila Afzali, are you here yet? Anila Afzali from Muslim Association of Puget Sound, MAPS Amen, will be here a little later. Anyone, did I miss any board members? All right. Who? Is he here? Rabbi Jason Levine, you're right, is coming. He'll be here after a child drop-off. So he ordinarily would be up here speaking with you, but all right, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I want to thank the United Churches of Olympia because this, to me, is sacred space for public witness. For all these years, we've been coming here. It's sacred space for public witness of many faith traditions. So thank you to Jane and to Severine. Oh, there's Jane. Jane is our host. If you have questions, Jane can answer them about the church. All right, so we also have some people online. Did I mention that? Some people who couldn't make it are watching at least this morning portion, so we're really delighted with that. We're not fully hybrid. We wish we could be, but we're not fully yet. All right, I'd like to invite Reverend Corey Passons up to give us more of a welcome to this space and to Olympia. Corey and I have collaborated, especially with our Interfaith Network for Indigenous communities, but there's a lot of good work that Corey of Interfaith Works can tell you about.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Okay, good. I'm so glad to see you all today. It's so wonderful to be here with you and to be in person today as we begin to advocate. I just want to recognize that each of us come today with our own varieties of skill sets, our own interests, maybe our own backgrounds, and our own points of particularity for the things that we're trying to accomplish today. The legislative agenda for FAN is large. Each of you probably have various connections to various points of legislation, but what we're doing today is we're building a community that's in solidarity together towards an arc of justice. So I'm just so grateful for you all to come together in the various ways that we operate and work outside of today, and that we can see each other and know that we're with each other as we move together towards the Capitol and towards movement for these efforts that bring forth social justice. So thank you, and thank you, Elise, to all the work that you do. Just want to recognize you and thank you for what you do. I serve UCC. I'm a United Church of Christ minister. I serve a congregation that meets in the social hall of this building called Community for Interfaith Celebration, which has been in that space since 1973. And so I also work for Interfaith Works, which is the coalition of 30-plus diverse faith communities and affiliated organizations. Thank you. That was kind of partial, but I like it. Thank you. But And it's the region's largest provider of social services for vulnerable adults experiencing homelessness. Please check out our website to learn about the new permanent supportive housing unit that we staff and the 65-bed emergency shelter that we host over on Martin Way. It's an incredible effort that's been through various grants and through associations of various organizations, and it's something to really celebrate. My work in the organization is among the coalition developing interfaith relations in that network, and it's just a joy to work among the diversity of the people who are in that organization. And our admin offices are here in the United Churches, so I literally work and I live here in the church. So this is what I do. And Interfaith Works wants to thank United Churches for being here. Pastor Laura couldn't be here today, but I feel like I'm a student ambassador to say on behalf of the United Churches, thank you. Thank you for being here, and we deeply welcome you into this space, and I hope it's a place of refreshment and sustenance as we move out and do our work. I want to offer a land acknowledgement today. This land acknowledgements are important for us to have a constant sense of remembrance, to interrupt the traditions of erasure that have happened with indigenous peoples and cultures. So today I offer this land recognition that was developed with coordination from Learning Right Relations and that was approved by the Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge that Thurston County is the traditional territory of the Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin, and Chehalis people. The surrounding mountains, valleys, shorelines, and waterways are imbued with their living presence. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and our shared responsibility to this place, their homelands, where we mutually abide. On October 10th, Interfaith Works and Faith Action Network hosted an event right here on this space on Indigenous Peoples Day with Sarah Augustine, who's an Indigenous author and activist. And she's with a coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery, which are the codified laws that were built through the Christian tradition that have served as the existing and standing legal foundation for the seizure of indigenous lands, completely legal under the precedents built up by the doctrine of discovery. What we learned, one of the ways that we can engage individually is that we can ask 3 questions. Who are the people who are the original inhabitants of the place where I live? What mechanism displaced those people? Where are they today? So I leave you with that invitation for your own places of where you live, and just want to welcome you again as we start our work today. Thank you. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you so much, Corey, and for all the work you do out of this space and beyond. So you can visit with some Interfaith Works members at the community table, we're calling it, over towards the back of the entrance area. And we also have some other materials there we hope you'll take home of both support for your Jewish neighbors and your Muslim neighbors. If you can post those in your homes or communities, that's another solidarity sign of solidarity that we ask, and more will be asked of us. We'll also have information back there for the Working Families Tax Credit, which you'll hear more about in the 10 o'clock Economic Justice Workshop. But please bring those back to your communities, because as of February 1st, a whole bunch of people in our state, 400,000 people, are eligible for up to $1,200 to put cash in their pockets to help pay bills. So there are materials in other languages that you can grab for your communities. Please do. So right now I want to introduce 2 people who always show up for us, and we hardly ever give them a mic. So today we gave them a mic. Our ELCA bishops, Bishop Shelley Brian Wee and Bishop Rick Jake, always show up for us. And I just want to mention that we were founded out of the Lutheran Public Policy Office and the Washington Association of Churches, merging 12 years ago to become a new thing, to be interfaith. But it's really important for us to remember the many Lutherans of you that are part of our network and the interfaith spirit that comes from your tradition. We are part of a nationwide ELCA advocacy network where we work with our colleagues across, 30 states to lift up the same bills. So we have power together, and our Lutheran colleagues at the national level also put us in touch with interfaith colleagues. So I would like to welcome Bishop Shelley and Bishop Rick to offer a reflection.
You can push this back after. Good morning. What a pleasure and a joy to be with you today. I was reflecting on some of the times when I've been unable to be here because we've had snow. Remember that huge snow that we had? When was that? Like 2018, 20? And then there was this pandemic. And so it is such a joy to be with you. Often I say as bishop, I say, this is the best thing about being bishop. But this, and I always mean it, but this is one of the best things about being bishop. So just so you know, we serve the I-5 corridor together of Western Washington. So the boundary is somewhere fuzzily around Federal Way. And depending on where that is, and Bishop Jake gets the peninsula, and I get the islands, and we are so happy to work together so often. We've been together 3 days in a row. This is our third event together, so that is great. I recently heard this verse, and I don't know why I didn't have this verse memorized, because it goes along with the Micah verse that we all know that is kind of steeped in us. But there's this verse in the first chapter of Isaiah, verse 17, that says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow." Isn't that what we're doing here today? Right? Yes. So I think even though we can expand the language of what Isaiah wrote to include some other places that society, some other people that society has marginalized, and even our very earth that we are standing on. And yet those words just struck me in the heart. And I think because the first word is learn. Learn. And I think that sometimes we forget that that's the first thing we need to do before we act. We learn, and then we act, and then we reflect and learn, and then we act again. We can't stop any of those places. We can't just keep learning. Many of us like to just keep learning and learning. And no action, right? And some people just act, and we think, oh, maybe a little learning would be good before you act. And so together, I think as community, we can teach and learn with one another and with our siblings who are outside of this community, where we can learn and we can hear voices of people that have a new way of thinking, have an old way of thinking that we have not been privileged to hear yet. And so I am so excited to be here. I will say that I was a board member back when I was a young pastor, when it was Lutheran Public Policy Office, long time ago, I don't know, I've been a pastor a long time, but a long time ago. And I am so thankful that we have expanded to FAN, that we have interfaith voices, that we have such dedicated and wonderful people here. And so as we go forward, as we act, and as we learn, may we remember these words from Isaiah, that we are speaking for all the people whose voices are unfortunately not being spoken today, and yet we may speak today. Amen.
Good morning. It's good to be with you. I'm Rick Jake, the Bishop of the Southwestern Washington Synod, and it's very good to be with you again this year. I remember when I was in about 6th grade, I grew up in West Seattle and went to a Lutheran parochial school, Hope Lutheran School in West Seattle, and we took a class trip down to Olympia and ended up visiting the governor's office. Governor Rossellini was the governor at that time. Some of you will remember Governor Rossellini. And it was my very first time in the Capitol building, the very first time for sure to meet the governor. I was very impressed by that. And then, life goes on and you grow up and you find other things to do. And it's good to be back again with all of you in Faith Action Network. The phrase that comes to mind is we are practicing justice together. We don't have it all down. We don't know all the answers. Justice is a collective thing. Good theologians talk about God is compassion and God is justice. Compassion in the one-on-one sense, caring about people, responding to needs. But justice is doing the best possible for the most number of people. And it's great to be with all of us because justice is a collective action. I'm particularly grateful that this is an interfaith effort because we have to learn from one another and support one another. But it's just very good to be with you. So let's go back to the office buildings today. Let's talk to our representatives. Let's listen and learn. That's exactly right. Let's listen and learn. But let's also bring our word, the word that's formulated in our hearts, brought to us by God's presence. Let's bring our words of justice and of care and of advocacy for people in need and for ourselves and for the whole community. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you both so much. We're running over, so we'll get you up here in 1 minute. I want to shout out to another group that just came with lots of energy today, and I see some green shirts out there, and that would be the Poor People's Campaign. So I believe there are about 50 of you who have joined us today. And I'm just so grateful that you have come with this new energy to Washington state politics, to national politics, and you bring your moral voice as we strive to bring our moral voice. We work on such similar issues, and we both have fusion politics. We see the connections between everything. So thank you for being here. I hope we make room to hear and to learn, as Bishop Shelley said, from the voices of people who are impacted by policies that we work on. Let's make room to learn today and to hear and to let voices be shared. The thing I know from the Poor People's Campaign, I'm sure you'll help me out with this, is that the way we do this is forward together. Forward together. All right, let's do that. And right now I want to invite up our wonderful staff to tell you how the day will go. And then we have a special visitor who's coming almost here, Representative Mylan Tai. But first, staff, if you could talk about the day.
Good morning. I'm Jess Ingman coming from East Wenatchee, Washington, and North Central Washington Regional Coordinator. And I'll have the other staff introduce themselves as well.
I'm Elizabeth Dickinson. I'm the Partnership Coordinator for the Western Shore, I guess.
I'm Reverend Eric Don Anderson. I am the Regional Organizer in South Central Washington.
We're so glad to be with you today. And on the TV here, monitor, you can see kind of a breakdown of our agenda. In a moment, we will turn from the reflections to an update on our legislative session that Kristen will be leading us with, as well as Representative Tai, and kind of highlighting some of our fan priorities. We will have 2 rounds of workshops after this, and in a moment, Eric will speak to where you can find those, but they'll be about 35 minutes each. And then after our workshops, there will be lunch available outside in the sanctuary, and that will be a great time to caucus while eating, connect with folks in your district, and make our plans for those afternoon meetings. Then at 12:15, by 12:15, we're going to want to be at the Capitol steps for our group photo. And as you go through the afternoon and attend appointments, there will be in the Sherberg building, conference room ABC will be open for fan attendees to use in between meetings. And then this church space will be open until 3:30 p.m. To meet carpool groups or to come back here. So that is some of the general flow. And then I want to maybe turn it over to Elizabeth to say a word about our caucuses.
Hi, everyone. So good to be with you all. So a word on caucuses, the legislative district caucuses, which begin at 11:20, I think. The way to meet up with your fellow districts is through these numbers that are around here. And some of you have big groups, like we're up to 22, I think, in one legislative district. So you can, after you congregate, you can go and find a place to meet. So the major job that you have is to decide which couple issues you want to talk about together with your legislator, identify who's going to be doing the talking, but reflective of everyone. There are some of you who have really close back-to-back meetings, and we apologize for that. So you could either decide to divide up or, book it. So whatever you could do about that. And there's some COVID protocols in some offices that are limiting the number of people. So take a look at your sheet of paper, and there are some notes about that, and you may need to divide up. I think that's good enough.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And now we'll have Eric to share a little bit about the workshops and where to find them.
Hopefully you've received an email with a table like I'm looking on my phone, or you have it another way. If you haven't, I'm just here to run through how we've got this organized. In 30 minutes, you're going to be in the sanctuary for the workshop, Promote Economic Justice, Tax Reform, and Working Families Tax Credit, right here. And if you're going to the workshop, Immigrant and Refugee Rights, that is going to be in the chapel, which is across the open area from this room. If you're going to Anti-Hunger and Protecting the Safety Net, that's in the fireside room, and that's out those doors and to the right and kind of around where the food was earlier this morning, if you got here in time for that. And if you're climate change and environmental justice, you're in the social hall. And that is to the left and down the stairs, and a big open space with a beautiful lavender, what are those called? Labyrinth. Yeah, I should know that. Okay, so you'll be there for 35 minutes, and then you'll have 5 minutes to get to your next place. And the next place, if you want increased gun responsibility and protect public safety, that will be meeting in the sanctuary. In the chapel at 10:40 will be criminal justice system reform. In the fireside room, protect healthcare access. And then in the social hall with the labyrinth, affordable housing. So hopefully you'll find each other down there and share the energy.
And I'd like to just add that if you have a limited number of people who can show up, we're hoping that you take a picture of your the participants from your legislative district, which you can share with your legislator, and people who can't go. There are memos to your legislator out on the table, and other members can just write a quick note. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone. We are so happy that you are here in Olympia because your voices are so needed. I'm Kristen Eng. I am FAN's Policy Engagement Director, and I am so honored to introduce Representative Mylan Tai. She is the Deputy Majority Leader of the House Democratic Caucus. She serves on the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee, Finance Committee, and Healthcare and Wellness Committee. And prior to being a representative, she was also Bellevue School District. I just want to shout out a couple of bills that we have helped pass with Rep. Tai as a prime sponsor, like the Working Families Tax Credit. That's $300 to $1,200. And I hope every single faith community that's part of FAN will push that out there, because that is $300 to $1,200 into the pockets of everyday people annually. That's life-saving cash. And the other thing from last year that all of us wrote letters to every single legislator that we could, that Rep. Tai pushed, was about $30 million for refugee support. And so thank you so much, Rep. Tai. And with no further ado, Rep. Mylan Tai.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much for your advocacy. I was standing back there and I was thinking, oh, is it possible that I can just like scream from the top of my lung without this microphone? Because like that's how I feel like I can actually move around instead of like being stuck at the podium. And so you might see that happen. And if I was not loud enough, I promise I'd come back to the microphone. It's just, and then we was chatting back there how wonderful it is to see each other in person, that human connection. And honestly, that is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm hoping that's the reason why you are doing what you are doing, is about human connection. Most of the legislation that I would agree or choose or have the honor to prime sponsor is about the humanity of us, is about seeing each of us as who we are. And I wrote down all the important workshop that you will get through the day, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's important to me. Oh yeah, that's important to me. Oh yeah, that's important to me. And I couldn't thank you enough. And I think in the name of your organization, Faith Action Network. Every single word exude love. And so I want to, because I don't think I have a chance to really personally thank you for sharing your love through your faith, and not just saying it with word, but through your action, and not acting alone, but building up the network. Because when we are together, we are stronger. Nothing can stop us. So when Kristen mentioned the Working Families Tax Credit, including I-10 filer, and we know who need to use I-10 to file their tax. These are the people who want to pay tax when they work, and our tax credit should not exclude them, because everything in our system excludes them. We exclude them from seeing their own humanity. We exclude them from knowing that they too, having families, they are brother and sister, they are father and mother, they are child, they children of someone, they are loved, and they have the capacity to love. And I think that is critically important for this year. We are expanding the working family tax credit to include 18 years old and 65 years and older. It's like what breaks my heart, especially our 65 years and older who fall under certain poverty level couldn't really afford not to work. Remember, the one big piece about this tax credit is you have to work, right? And recognizing 18 years starting to be in the workforce, and they are not being seen and recognized that they too pay into, they too are the backbone of our Washington state growth. So I will tell you right now, that bill is going to be exec out of Finance Committee today, this afternoon. But this is where I'm asking for your help. With an amendment attached to it, and literally saying it, it's bring me PTSD. The original working family tax credit 15 so years ago, having this amendment attached to it, which it say subject to appropriation. So those who've been in that fight long time ago know why I'm having PTSD. That I feel that I'm forced to attach that onto the bill. Personally, I think it's wrong. We should prioritize it and fund it, and it shouldn't be subject to appropriation. These are the people who work, and these are the credit back to the tax that they put into the system. They pay so much tax, and all we give them, especially our 18 years old children, as individual without children, $300 a year back into their pocket is really nothing. My hope is that we can start increasing it to at least $500 because we all know from our data, our people only $400 away from bankruptcy, being homeless and not being able to take care of themselves. And so I am asking for your help. The bill can only be out of committee with that amendment on. That means we need to start pushing appropriation to prioritize funding this because we cannot stop. And especially when your legislator, regardless if they're Democrat or Republican, you hear this from the deputy majority leader. Regardless, do not assume that because your legislator has a D behind their name, you don't tell them about these things. Tell them that you should prioritize funding expansion of working families tax credit, especially if you talk about hard time coming up, if you talk about recession, if you talked about budget downturn, exactly because of that, you need to fund expansion of working family tax credit because these are our workers, and they deserve this. And I think we haven't talked about my other really, really cool bill that I'm sponsoring this year, which has been championed by the former Representative Frame and now Senator Frame, billionaire tax. And I'm going to close quickly because I know you need to get to where you need to go because I can be with you and sit with you and talk to you days after days after days because we have so much work to be done. Billionaire tax, the reason why I am the prime sponsor in the House, well, obviously because I care deeply about the equity and the fairness of our entire system. But more importantly, if we have any of the individual who, my constituent in the 41st Legislative District, 41st Legislative District will be the #1 district when this passed, have the most individual who have the privilege to pay this tax. Also, and so if the 41st hear of anybody, any billionaire who's whining and complaining about it, remind them this is your privilege to pay this tax. The second district follow the 41st is 48th. 48th. The third is 43rd. Fourth is 45th. And fifth is 36th. So if you remember 41st, 48th, 43rd, 45th, 36th, those are the districts. If you go and talk to your legislators, they are Democrat, I think, both in the House and the Senate, making sure you ask them to be your champion in passing wealth tax this year, because we cannot wait. And I thank you.
Well, thank you, Rep. Tai. Now you know why we love her and why she advocates on the values that we all share at FAN. I mean, I could go on of some of the bills that she has, like Healthcare for Equity for Immigrants campaign, because she is on healthcare. But like I was telling you, you are here at the right time, because February 17th is the policy cutoff. Where we are in the bills process is that they are hearing all the bills in all the different policy committees, whether that's civil rights or whether that's law and justice. You have the chance to persuade your legislators to pass these bills. This is a 105-day long session this year, and we are on week 5. It's still early, but I also say it's a critical time because we are here at the legislature post-pandemic. I think we've had a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to evaluate, and I always called the pandemic, the COVID-19 was a great reveal about what is happening to our society, where are the cracks, and also what is the good, because we did all come together and provide mutual aid. We did not, as some of the movies like to show, devolved into people who just took care of themselves. We looked out for each other. But when we're taking a look at what kind of vision we want for the world, I often think that people of faith are very persistent, strong, and compassionate, and are very much needed. Their voice are very much needed here right now, because this is my first year in person at the Capitol doing this advocacy, and it can be like a dome and a bubble. I know people live outside the world, but we need to hear what the needs are. I'm going to specifically call out our legislative agenda, and it is large. People say, like, why is it all over the place? Because we believe an injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. A solution in one section is also part of the solution in other section. You can't have environmental justice and housing as separate, because they're actually connected, whether that's criminal justice reform, promoting economic justice, whether that's tax reform and our social safety net. Those two are actually intertwined. And that's why we won all those things last year, was because we were able to defend against broad tax cuts so we could have those wins and the safety net. But a lot of work needs to be done, because the reality has set in and the federal government support has now ended. I'm going to call out a couple things. You will have these workshops from these economic, from all our agenda, from the Working Families Tax Credit, which we all need you to promote, as well as pass the expansion, as Rep. Tai has said, to our safety net. This one needs a lot of work. Free school meals for all children. Now, that sounds like everywhere I go, bipartisan, Republican, Democrat, from the waitress that I talk to the executive that I talk to. Yeah, we want that. We need that. We have these needs. I go to the legislature, it's like, well, maybe we have money for that. And I was this would actually address the learning loss that they're all talking about, and child hunger, the lunch debt, the shaming. But we need help on the Senate Ways and Means Committee. We need help on the House Appropriations. At this point in the legislature, even if things are passing, it is all about the money. And our budget should reflect our values. We should be feeding our children. So free school meals needs a lot of help. I'm just going to put it out there. And the one that is really an emergency is House Bill 1784. This is concerning hunger relief. The federal emergency allotment of food will end in February 2023. We will lose $93 million a month to our state by that time. And that was to our food banks, to senior meals, incentivized fruit and vegetables. There has been a bill that was put out there by Rep. Gregerson and Ormsby. It is to address that we need action now. So this is an early action adoption, and we need to have our legislature be on board quickly so we can get this money out ASAP, as soon as possible. Because when emergency ended, they took out a lot of people's benefits. So people that maybe were getting $200 will now get $20. Or the food banks. The food banks, they did not see a decrease in need post-pandemic. They're seeing more of a need because of high inflation costs and also housing. So we need you there. I'm just going to call out those because those need a lot of help. And we also have the criminal justice reform, solitary confinement. I always tell people, like, it doesn't matter if there's 700 or 1. The faith communities will be there for the 1. And real labor, real wages. This is a fundamental change, like a revolutionary change in terms of incarcerated persons receiving minimum wage. We all say, legislators always talk about the value of work and feeling that and whatnot, but why do we pay them 49 cents? And how are they going to have successful entry or pay for victim restitution or any sorts of thing? And why do we charge them more than the airports for some regular goods when they're pretty much caged there? And so this one will be talked about in the criminal justice reform and gun responsibility. I've heard from many of you, from faith communities have taken this up, from Emmanuel Presbyterian, who's done a workshop and to promote this. And there will be a lot. There will be this ban on the sale of assault weapons. There is firearms permit requirements. There's also still police accountability. Rep. Ty I see some snaps over there. So Rep. Ty also is one of the sponsors for our police accountability bills. That's House Bill 1025. Those of you who are going to that section, there'll be 4 of the 4 bills. And that is to remove qualified immunity so that families can seek a civil remedy and action. And an interesting one is that I've heard this from our Vancouver folks in Clark County, that they wanted the AG to be able to step in to take a look at systemic abuses, not just incidents, but is this a systemic issue that's not being taken care of? And I heard that when we did our summit over there, and this is a bill to address that. For affordable housing, I don't need to tell you that this is the #1 priority this year. Everyone knows this, and I think we as people of faith, we always see a vision. Everyone is housed, everyone is fed, everyone feels their potential, and I think we need people to know this in the legislature. The money people need to know this. And there is a lot of bills out there in terms of rent, in terms of the bonds, the $4 billion governor bond, which will be hard, so we need to press our legislators to do more in terms of providing housing. And then there's climate change. There's people planning for, our government should be planning, and our local city, county leaders should be planning to reduce GHG as well as plan for climate resiliency, because it's no longer a question if it's here, if it exists, climate change, it's happening. It's happening and it's accelerating. And with that is modernizing our recycling system, as well as because we are experiencing extreme weather, we are also asking for extreme heat utility shut-off moratorium, which clean water and your utilities should be provided for you during these emergencies. 157 people died in our extreme heat of 2021. And this, I don't foresee us not having, I see us having extreme heat and extreme colds in the future. And we'll need this to save lives. And then, of course, there's healthcare access. We all need this, and there'll be a workshop for that. And of course, we support our immigrant and refugee community, particularly the unemployment insurance for undocumented workers. We called them essential. They work through this pandemic. They deserve our support, and actually also helps our community when they have support, as well as the Healthcare for Equity campaign. I'm trying to make this short because I know you're so excited to get to your workshops, and there is plenty. If you've seen our legislative agenda online, our bill tracker, There is so much, and if you have any questions, you can always come to me. I'll put out cards. And to everybody who is coming to us, this legislative agenda did not just come from one person or a group of people. It came from all of you, came from the board. We also have so many coalition partners like the Washington Low Income Housing Association, who their experts will be here to present about housing, or from Earth Ministry, who's here, who will talk about the climate bills. Every single one of these sections came from a collaboration of thousands and many, many hundreds of organizations, healthcare organizations. We are part of the Healthcare is a Human Right. So together with our solidarity, we are hoping to build the kind of world we want, the kind of world that shares in our values. And like I said, I am so happy to see you there. We're so happy because you are so needed today. You are the witnesses to your communities, and your lived experience, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes people's perfections prevent them from acting. But your lived experience, your witness of what's happening in your community, that's what needs to be heard by our legislatures. We are trying to reach their hearts, minds, and souls and move them. So thank you for being here today.
She got through our super long agenda that quick. She is amazing. So, we're on time now. So it's time to choose your workshop and start making your way towards them. There's still coffee and food. 2 things I want to say. People ask about the orange scarves. Orange is the color of anti-hunger advocacy and anti-gun violence and probably many other things. But today it's the color of fan. Any other question, Elizabeth? Poor People's Campaign has an announcement.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank FAN because you guys have put together an awesome program, and it really is a moral program. And I want to export FAN to every other state that the Poor People's Campaign is in because you're doing such a great job. So we're going to try to do some other events, and we want to have people meet us to talk about other event planning. So when you're finished with your legislative meetings, come on back, especially after the photo op, come on back. And we will also take an extra photo at the photo op with just people who are supporting the Poor People's Campaign. So thank you very much. Thank you.
We have time for one question. Does anyone have a question? I know. We should have time for lots. But questions? There's a Wi-Fi password if you need it. Talk to Blake out at the table. It's hanging on the wall in the library if you need the Wi-Fi passcode. Most of all, there's a question. Yeah. Excellent. So the legislative caucuses, or people from your legislative district at 11:20, 11:15, 11:20, come to the sign that has your number of your legislative district, either in this wall, that wall, or there are some on the pews too. And it doesn't mean that you'll all meet here because no one would hear anything. Large groups, there are many rooms you can move to. You can move to the chapel, you can move to the fireside room, you can move downstairs. There's the social hall or room 5 downstairs. There's the library. So if you're a large group, I would suggest you move out to one of those bigger spaces so you can hear each other. If you're a small group of 2, 3, 5, you could cluster around in here. Does that help? And so that's at 11, after workshops are over 11:15, 11:20, we'll start that process. 12 o'clock, you just can't eat in here, just remember. Can't bring your lunches in here, but you can bring your lunches, which will be here by 11:15, anywhere else, all right? Oh, parking, if you've parked on this campus in any form, either above, below, to the side, please move your car. Kitty corner, that way, is a public lot where you can pay by a machine, $2 an hour. You just select how many hours you're going to be here. But if you park downstairs or up above here on the campus, please move your car. There's another group coming in the afternoon. Y'all are great. How are we going to do this? Forward together? Forward together? Do it for a third time. Forward together!
Thank you for everything you're doing. So our little caucus, our little district, we have something at 11:30. It's to get over there. I mean, I don't even know the other people or how to make, and that's all going to be after they start, or it's before they start caucusing. There's a few early meetings.
Let me see if I know any of them that I can point to. Oh, I don't know. Here.
Well, these others are later in the afternoon, but the one that's meeting with that person is, there's 24, and does this tell how many people from our district are here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 24, Chris Thomas, Julie Cochran.
This is Chris.
Okay, Julie Cochran, Kelly Olson, and So I don't know. Julie Cochran. I do know her. You guys are from the peninsula?
Yeah, first time, never been here. I'm Blake's father-in-law. I came to your, and this is his wife works for somebody up here, so.
So I think Julie is here. Oh, that's Julie right there. Grab her.
In the blonde here?
And then you guys just make a plan. Yeah. Okay. That's Julie right there. Thanks. Good luck. Okay.
All right, we're just testing the mic, so yeah, we're going to kind of try to speak up a little louder here. Okay. Okay, I think we're going to get going in about 1 minute, so we want to be mindful of our own time. We're only going to do the session once, and there's a group coming in after us, so got about 1 minute and we'll get started. Okay, it looks like we're pretty much settled, so we're going to get going. So Emily, we've been asked to speak right into the mic for, I've got 2 hearing aids myself, and we don't have a lot of volume here, so we'll try to speak up. If you're having trouble hearing us, raise your hand. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for your interest in economic justice. I am Steve Claggett. I am one of the... Yeah, go ahead. Oh. All right. Okay. There is hearing assisted devices, so I guess you just go out in the lobby there and talk to somebody, and you can get if you need. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Steve Claggett, a co-leader of a FANS Economic Justice Working Group. This is an active group. We've had this group going since about, 2015, 2016. First things we worked on was the state minimum wage initiative. We got more signatures out of FAN than any other non-labor group for that initiative, and it passed, and that's why we have the statewide minimum wage. So give yourselves a hand. Second thing we worked on was capital gains tax. We got that passed, and we're trying to get a favorable ruling from the state Supreme Court to move that forward. See if I can get this thing to work. There we go. We always show this graph. This is Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy. That line going down on the left, that's sinking further, so much further than any other state, that's Washington State. That's showing our tax regressivity. Our lowest percentile by income, the lowest 20% of households by income, pay massively more in taxes than any other group in any other state. I think Florida's next up, and you can see the difference there. We're higher than 12% of their household income goes to taxes in Washington State for low-income people versus the next worst is Florida at 9%. Should we get this clicker to work? Okay, capital gains. I mentioned that it's in the state Supreme Court. If you're interested in this issue and why it's constitutional, go to the SeattleTimes.com and put in capital gains in Hugh Spitzer, S-P-I-T-Z-E-R. He's a UW law professor on constitutional and our Washington State law, and there's good information there about why this thing is not, as some claim, against our state constitution. This is our economic justice agenda, and working families tax credits, top one there, and Emily Vinanik of the Washington State Budget and Policy Center is going to come up and speak, and I'm going to turn it over really quickly to her for about 10 minutes to explain where we are on that. And Representative Ty, as you heard, is just a big proponent and got us started on that. And then I'm going to go over the other items. So Emily, you want to come up now?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. I'm going to try to talk loudly today. I don't have slides, so we're just going to keep on this today. But I don't know if you all are aware of how exciting of a time it is for the Working Families Tax Credit, because not only are we finding ourselves in the middle of an exciting legislative session where we're trying to expand and make the credit more accessible, we are also in the midst of actively launching the credit for the very, very first time for Washingtonians. What does that mean? So Faith Action Network has been a part of the Working Families Tax Credit advocacy from the very, very beginning. Faith Action Network was here in 2007 when the first advocacy around the Working Families Tax Credit started. And for some of the folks who either are in this room or are part of Faith Action Network for a very long time, you might know that in 2008, the Working Families Tax Credit was first established. It was written into law, but it was never funded. So that critical life-saving cash support that we know communities can benefit and thrive with was just sitting on the books, waiting to get out to people. And you might know from that graph that Steve just shared, we're a state without an income tax, so we have a deeply, deeply regressive tax code. So not only was this credit lane unfunded, a very powerful mechanism to be able to support communities wasn't actually built. The infrastructure was not there. So we, over a long period of time, you can tell, 2008 is quite a long time ago now, like almost 15 years now. But it really wasn't until the Working Families Tax Credit, which is the coalition, Working Families Tax Credit Coalition, which is the coalition I get to work with people like Steve, like Elise, all of you in this room have worked really, really hard to push the legislature not only to fund what's on the books, but say that's not good enough. We need to expand it and make this credit more expansive and more inclusive of folks like undocumented immigrants, and make the credit just way, way more than what was envisioned in 2008. So that vision was realized in 2021. So you might know that 2021 marks our first full year into that global pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that we still find ourselves in. In 2021, the legislature, the conversation around what it meant to support communities through direct cash resources, the conversation dramatically shifted. For a long time, the conversation was, well, is this enough? Like, what does it mean to support communities? Is this refund going to do anything to stabilize communities? But we saw those early months of the pandemic with cash stimulus payments, just how critical the power to choose how you spend your resources was, not only for a global pandemic and trying to stay safe, but to support yourselves and make the decisions that you know you need to make in times of crisis or not times of crisis. So we saw the conversation change really dramatically. It really lit a fire under all of the coalitions to say, not only do we need to fund this, we need to make this as big as we can make it. And so what passed in 2021 is what is reaching communities right now. I know myself and many other members of the coalition are actively working in this moment to connect people to the Working Families Tax Credit. I'm volunteering as a free tax preparer in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Seattle, where I live, and have already helped several people apply for the Working Families Tax Credit, getting $600, $900, or $1,200 back in their pockets just from this tax credit. And that goes a really, really, really long way. So I wanted to add that context as to how we find ourselves here, because it's really important to understand kind of how we're approaching where we go from this moment. Steve mentioned before, and I think I might have just dove into the Working Families Tax Credit history without formally introducing myself. So my name is Emily Vananek. I'm with the Washington State Budget and Policy Center, but my role is really all about the Working Families Tax Credit. I get to work in coalition with over 50 organizations, Faith Action Network included, that reach statewide. And this coalition really has been the generator of the movement around the working families tax credit. I genuinely believe that this tax credit wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for Faith Action Network and the other organizations who have been unwavering in their commitment to this credit. And where we're at right now is that 400,000 households stand to be eligible for this tax credit in this first year. And we know, despite that being an enormous number and so many households and families impacted by this credit, we know that's just a fraction of the folks who are impacted by our upside down tax code. That picture that Steve had at the beginning, the graph that showed kind of how regressive our tax code is, despite the working families tax credit impacting 1 in 4 kids in Washington, we know that's not enough. We know we cannot wait to expand this tax credit because it's a proven tool. There's a wealth of research that shows that it's linked, tax credits like the working families tax credit are linked to better public health outcomes like reduced mental distress and increased physical well-being. We know that it's linked to higher or lower infant mortality rates, especially for Black mothers. So there's already a huge body of research and growing research. Actually, the coalition works with, stays connected to some researchers at the University of Washington right now, epidemiologists who are actively studying state level tax credits like this. And how that is linked to harm reduction, decreased gun violence, decreased childhood maltreatment. The list goes on. And I know that I'm talking to a whole host of folks who know this issue and know why economic justice is a core piece of the puzzle when it comes to supporting people. We got to look at both ends of the spectrum, not only taxation, but how are we redistributing that wealth that we have in our communities to support communities. So that's where our strategy for the 2021 legislative session kind of comes in. The coalition, we're really, really focused on making sure that people know about the tax credit. I see my coworker Leela just arrived in the back there, and Leela has been working really, really hard with a whole host of members of the coalition to make sure folks know about the credit, know how to access it, know how to apply for it. But the 2 bills that we're choosing to prioritize this year are the result of a long, long time of the coalition not only working hard to set this program up and seeing what kind of statutory changes we know we need to make, but it's also a result of a lot of iterative conversations to say, okay, if we're not gonna wait to expand this program, how do we do it really thoughtfully and make sure that we're addressing eligibility gaps that exist in the program? We know that the foundation that was set in 2021 was really, really strong. It's one of the strongest foundations for a state tax credit that I personally know, and I've been doing stuff around taxes for a really, really long time, and have learned about different state tax codes that are much more progressive than ours. But this tax credit is really, truly designed in a way to really meet the needs of Washingtonians. But when I talk about eligibility gaps, that's where I want to talk about HB 1075. Who all heard Rep. Ty this morning? Did y'all hear? Isn't she amazing? She's honestly a really big model and example of how a lawmaker can act as a conduit for community voices. We work with Rep. Ty and have worked with Rep. Ty for several years now. She was the prime sponsor on the 2021 legislation. And we're working with her now to make sure that everyone 18 and older can access the credit, even if you don't have a child. So right now, there's because the working families tax credit is connected eligibility-wise to the federal earned income tax credit, there's this wonky stipulation for folks who do not have kids. So if you have kids, you're not subject to any age restriction, so it doesn't apply to you if you have a qualifying child. But the minute you don't have a qualifying child, you have to be at least 25 and under the age of 65. So notably, that excludes 2 age groups that we know are facing some of the biggest barriers to accessing public benefits, but also facing some of the biggest increases in poverty. So we know that 18 to 24-year-old group, that is the age group that experiences the highest rates of poverty across the United States. And that 65 plus group was the only age group last year to experience an increase in poverty. So we know something is going wrong there, and we know we can be better supporting those age groups, and expanding the Working Families Tax Credit to effectively create an age base, but not an age ceiling, is one way that we think that we can really, really support communities. I was just talking to one of the members of the coalition who is helping file people's taxes for free, who helped a 64-year-old do their taxes, apply for the Working Families Tax Credit, and get $300 back from that. But next year, they will not be able to access that if we don't make this change. So that's the kind of stakes that we're talking about. People who are experiencing the exact same rates of poverty, the exact same kind of instability, can benefit from this, but are excluded simply because of their age. The last bill I want to talk about really briefly is 1477, and then I'll wrap up. It's really about technical fixes to the Working Families Tax Credit that we identified during the setup of the program. So effectively, this bill addresses three things. One, it establishes a reporting requirement from the Department of Revenue to just share out about the program to the legislature every start of the biennium. Pretty standard. The second is to include all filing status, which is a technical inclusion of a status called married filing separately. Married filing separately is oftentimes excluded from a lot of tax benefits, including the Working Families Tax Credit, but it is a status that's used a lot by survivors of intimate partner violence who are trying to escape and trying to avoid further financial abuse from their spouse. So we think that that status should be included. And then the final piece is really making sure that folks have the fullest window of time to claim refunds, which for the IRS is 3 years after the filing season. And so we think that should be the same here in Washington. So those are some three easy fixes that we've put in 1477. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but I'm actually going to pass it back to Steve, and just want to say, like, deeply from my heart, like, thank you so much for being in this work with us, because we're not done by any means. We see the tax credit as a platform to build from, and this advocacy is a part of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Out in the lobby, there's some flyers that you can pick up and put in your congregation and publish, whether people can see it in several languages, about because this is key, getting the word out about to people. So because you have to apply to get these Working Families Tax Credit, it's not going to come to people automatically. So that's just really key, and you can play a key role in that. Okay, I want to move on here through our agenda. The other items we have, next one down is the guaranteed basic income. Times are changing. More and more people's jobs are being done by machines. There may come a time in the future when most jobs will be done by machines, and people are going to get displaced. And more and more economists and others are looking to either universal income or guaranteed basic income. Universal gives everybody a certain amount. It's a Scandinavian model. The guaranteed basic income is a means test. If you're low income, you have the right to get a certain amount of money per month, and it's just another way to redistribute money and to get reduce regressivity, become a more progressive state. There is a pilot bill that's been put forward by Representative Liz Berry, who's from the ballot area of Seattle. And there's a lot of debate going on about it in terms of what the levels and the amounts might be. The key thing is we ought to, in my opinion, and fans, we ought to try something. Tacoma did a pilot project. Everywhere they've tried a pilot project with guaranteed basic income, the economists have studied those, and the results coming out that these are incredible success. When you give people the right to choose for themselves how they want to apply money, people do incredible things to improve their lives, as opposed to what we have now, which is pretty much a system where you can go apply for a certain kind of assistance, but it may not be exactly what you want. So I encourage you to support a bill of this sort. We'll have questions in a minute at the end. We're leaving time. Baby bonds. This proposal to pretty much allow set up a Washington Future Fund. There'd be about anybody who's eligible for Medicaid and their family is eligible for Medicaid. At birth, each child would be given a deposit of money that would grow over their earlier years, and then about age 18 to 30, they'd have the right to tap into that for various education or some way to improve their lives. This needs our support as well. Wealth tax on billionaires. This would another way to call it extreme wealth tax, because it only would apply to people who have income or have assets over $250 million would pay a tax on their wealth in excess of $250 million of 1%. This would bring in our state, because we have a number of people in this category, a huge amount of money that would be then another way to shift that money to people of lesser means and to become a more progressive state. And finally, on our agenda is to repeal the statewide advisory votes. This is a Tim Eyman item from a number of years ago, and it litters our ballots, and you know, young people voting for the first time see these things and what is this? I'm asked to vote on something that's already been passed by our representatives, so we want this thing to be repealed. I've created a chart, and I've got 40 copies of this I can give to you. I can't move away from the mic and have the Zoom people not hear me, so I'm going to try to do this from here. At the top, you see where it says district rep. That's district representative or Senate, and there are a number of districts listed there by the committees, and these are the key. There are 5 committees that are holding all the legislation on our 6 areas that you see, or was it 6, 5, 6? 6 areas there. And so if you do use that matrix, you can see where the bills are and in what committee, and then what legislative district has people on those committees. So that today when you go out to meet with your people, look across that top and see if you see your district listed, and look down and you'll see what the bill is, and you'll see what the agenda item is, and that'll help you at least in the economic justice area to push our stuff forward. All right, we are at 10:25, and I'll open up for questions and answers. Yeah, right here in the front row. Okay. Okay, that's great. Emily, I'm going to ask you or somebody, that's a roving mic there. That mic is live. If somebody could walk it around, that'll help. It should be anyway. Yeah, I'm hearing it.
Hello?
Okay, another question? Yes, sir. Just a minute till the mic gets to you.
Hi, my name is Reggie Avant. I'm from District 37. I am a pastor at Madrona Grace Presbyterian Church in Seattle. I want more information about the working tax. Just want to make sure I'm clear about it. As far as working, I thought I heard somebody said you don't have to be working, you have to be working. I just want to make sure I have the right information as I talk about that.
Yeah, Emily can answer that. Why don't you just take the mic, and I'll repeat for the question is, do you have to be working in order to take it and get the tax credit?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So it is based off your earned income, because it's the Working Families Tax Credit, the kind of origin idea for it was based on the federal earned income tax credit, which is considered one of the best anti-poverty tools that the federal government has. And within that eligibility, it's based on your earned income. So an example of unearned income would be like disability benefits. Another example is Social Security benefits are considered unearned income. Those are considered payments in the IRS's eyes to you. Earned income are things like, you know, if you get a W-2 at the end of the year, you could be self-employed. Maybe you're working an Uber or Lyft job. something like that. Anything that you're kind of like working to earn money would qualify you for this, and you only need $1 in order to qualify for the maximum.
Thanks. Let's see. Let's go over here. And then you'll be next over here.
Good morning. There's no companion bill for HB 1045 yet. Is there anyone in the Senate that might support that bill that we should be talking to today about creating a bill,
You know,
a companion
I don't
bill?
know the answer to that. Kristen Kristen had been in the back of the room. She's not here. Oh, there she is.
Maybe over you, Emily. At least we're still looking.
Let me just repeat the question. If you look on that chart up there, guaranteed basic income, there's no Senate bill. So the question is there anybody we should be talking to on the Senate side? And of course, everybody, but go ahead, Kristen.
Sure. I mean, I would talk to always the money people on the Senate side, or, if you're looking at ways and means, if you have a legislator, if you're from their district, please talk to them about the working families tax credit. We do need a champion in the Senate. This working families tax credit is actually touted by both Republicans and Democrats, but now it's a matter of actually passing the bills. Because when I see their websites, they're all claiming the working families tax credit as theirs. But we do need it to expand and do these technical fixes. In the House, it's looking good, but once it passes the House, we will need a champion in the Senate to pass it through, because it needs both houses.
So look upper left here, that large group there under Senate Ways and Means, all those district numbers. You have if you're in one of those legislative districts, you have somebody in Senate Ways and Means you could talk to about guaranteed basic income. Now I'm going to go, but there was somebody in the back, not here in front, but yeah.
I'll go here first.
Gentleman right over here.
I just wanted to name too, the House Bill 1045 is also, because there's 1045 and 1075. 1045 is the GBI, Guaranteed Basic Income. And I would say just generally from what I've heard from that GBI coalition is that talking to your senators and making sure that it's like you're naming it as a priority is really huge for them, because a lot of the Senate doesn't know quite yet.
I just wanted to clarify a couple.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just telling you you're next. There's a fellow behind you, directly behind you. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to clarify a couple of things. So the bill right now is a cleanup of the tax credit that was passed some years ago but hasn't actually been implemented yet. And there's an amendment currently attached to that by the the executive committee that's passed it out of executive committee. We would like that amendment to be dropped eventually.
Yeah. These are great questions. So
let me repeat it just so that people on the Zoom will hear. The question is, Representative Tai mentioned that the bill is likely to get voted out of committee today. It'll be out of the House Finance Committee, but there's going to be an amendment that says subject to appropriations. So that's the question. What's our position now?
Yeah, this is a great question. So generally on the subject to appropriations amendment, that one in particular, we are encouraging the members to reject. It is very possible that that amendment stays on there, which we will continue to troubleshoot during session and figure out if there's ways we can take that off later. But if you're having conversations with anyone today that's at the House Finance Committee, who is on the House Finance Committee, you could ask them if you don't know. You can just let them know that that amendment on the subject to appropriations, we encourage them to reject. That being said, your other question about what these bills do. So the Working Families Tax Credit is fully live right now, and that's after many years of infrastructure build-up. So these bills, so the 1477 bill, you could kind of think of that one as a cleanup bill, but it's basically some barriers and accessibility things that we identified during that setup of the program. So that's kind of what that bill's about. And then the 1075 is purely about expanding the eligibility pool. Great questions.
Okay. In the front row here, there's a question. Oh, it's done. Okay.
Awesome.
Any questions?
So the Poor People's Campaign listened to the state treasurer on the baby bonds future funds. It's, something new to me, but I know that the Poor People's Campaign has made that a top priority to break generational poverty.
Great.
And you could probably speak to
Good.
the
Yeah.
bill itself.
Kristen has a comment. Okay.
Right now, that Washington Future Fund, Senate Bill 5125, that has been referred for it's gone past the Senate policy, the Policy House Committee. It's now to Ways and Means. And we sent a letter along with 48 other organizations to Senate Ways and Means to hear it, to have a hearing on the Washington Future Fund, the baby bonds, the $4,000 at birth to all children born with Apple Care, so that when they are adults from 18 to 35, can use that funds for education, housing, and whatnot. So, or small businesses. So if you have someone on Ways and Means or influence the money, we would like a hearing and to get that going. So that's where we're at with that, is to have a hearing.
Chris, can you
It's
pass
Senate Bill 5125. It is called the Washington Future Fund Baby Bonds. And it was on the recommendation by our treasurer, Mike Pelliciotti. And it is, the prime sponsor is Senator Yasmin Trudeau.
I have 40 copies of this graph up there. I'm going to put them on the table here in the front. There's a question here.
And
Kristen,
also, we have a bill tracker, and you can see our legislative agenda on our website. So if you have your cell phones, you can also always go there to take a look at some of the bills as well as the legislative agenda.
A different economic justice bill is the minimum wage bill for prisoners. And I know that's going to be in another workshop, but I'd like to find out if anyone has any comment on the fiscal note associated with that bill.
Chris, maybe you have the answer. I don't know, but
I haven't seen it yet, but have you seen anything, Kelly or Anthony, on the fiscal note?
the question is if is there a fiscal
They're thinking
note
about
associated?
$9 million. About $9 million.
Yeah, so there's going to be some amendments that are going to be introduced. So the fiscal note, I believe that's on there now, is what it would be funding it at the full minimum wage. But there's going to be some concessions that are made, and I think what they're expecting to be able to get through, it'll come down to about $9 million. But the amendments haven't been drafted or introduced yet.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for the most up to date.
Okay, there is, as we mentioned, the FAN has an economic justice working group. If you're not on it already and would like to be on it, send an email. This is not too hard. Economic justice, all run together, lowercase, @fanwa.org. Just send an email with your name, and we'll add you to the 140 so FAN members who are members of the economic justice working group. Economic justice @fanwa.org. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Emily, and thanks for Kristen for helping.
Sorry, just last thing.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Leela. I work closely with Emily with the Working Families Tax Credit Coalition. I know some of you in here. I'm going to be grabbing some social media content, just asking folks if they're willing to take a photo or a short video sharing why you support the Working Families Tax Credit. So if you're not in a rush when you're heading out, I'll just be kind of at the doors there, and I would love to grab a few of you for that if you're willing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Green shirts. Oh, cool. Oh, no, I just didn't know. Whoever's doing whoever's doing Anthony and
I'm going to go there.
They're both important. You've come to the right place because Anthony and Kelly have been the real. Plus, some paperwork that they put out there. So Fred will be joining you on. Oh, awesome.
So you're going to be talking about 50.
So 132. Yep. Yes. So this is so these are like kind of the counterparts. If you're in the Senate, the money is the Ways and Means. If you're in the House, it's called appropriations. So if you have like divvy out the money. I'm Rules is very important as well because that means they're the ones who get to decide what's going to be voted on by the entire floor. So sometimes you have a committee, you can pass out like the House Civil Rights, go through some the fiscal, the money people, and then it still has to go for a full vote by the body, and the rules get to decide what goes out. Because it's all about time management. Mike there. I will just see if someone. Okay, I can introduce you. Oh no, I'll introduce you, and then you could go first, because I think you got a lot to say.
Aren't you doing the gun thing first, though?
I could, or I could just, I'll introduce you first, and then I'll do the gun thing. Or
You introduce me if you want, but do the gun thing, and then I'll just
Okay,
use
sure.
the rest of the time for.
Okay. Oh, Severin? Do you have the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability website ready? And I am just the bill tracker, if possible. Okay, you have that. Okay, maybe you. Okay. Let's see. It's time. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, it's 10:40. Yeah. Oh, it's 10:45? 10:40. All right, well, welcome everyone. This section of the workshop is police accountability as well as gun responsibility, public safety. So I just wanted to put that out there in case this is not your room. But if those are the issues that you wanted to be in, you are in the right place and at the right time. I'm Kristen Eng. As you know, I'm the Fan Policy Engagement Director. Today with me is Leslie Cushman. Cushman from the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability. Unfortunately, Tremaine Edwards from Alliance from Gun Responsibility cannot be here today, so I will be presenting the gun responsibility bills that are happening in the legislature, and it's a momentum from last year. There was momentum that a fan was part of with regards to the restrictions of high-capacity magazines down to 10 rounds. That was done. That was the last thing taken by the legislature before 5 o'clock, and it took a while, but it got passed after so many years that it did not. There was also a restrictions of open weapons and carry at the Capitol. That's why you won't see guns around people's offices anymore, around that area, as well as election-related facilities and schools, and the ending of the ghost gun loopholes. That fan had that as their priority, part of their agenda last year, and those three bills passed. Thank you. Thank you for your advocacy. This year, we're also looking at the top three bills with our coalition partner, which is the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. You can go ahead and take a look at their website. Their color is also orange. So hunger and gun responsibility is actually the orange color and is often worn by advocates. To go over our gun responsibility bills as well as public safety bills that we have, I would say the first one is House Bill 1240. That is the ban on the sale of assault weapons. And that is prime sponsored by Representative Peterson. In his district 8 years ago, he often cites that there was a young man who was a bit disturbed and took an assault weapon at a party and killed 3 people and injured 1. It was only fortunate that this person did not know how to really use that gun, but was still able to inflict that amount of harm. And in fact, with assault weapons, it is 11 times more likely the weapon of choice in mass shootings, and 7 times more likely that is the weapon that kills an officer. So these weapons of war, as this representative said, should not be prolific in our streets and easily accessible to our youth, to our young adults, and that is why they would like a ban on the sale of assault weapons. This has been probably put out here for like 7 years or so, but this may be the year that it passes with your advocacy, and that is House Bill 1240. That's the moving bill. There is a Senate companion bill, and it has, let me see here. Yeah. So whoever you talk to, please talk about that one, as well as Senate Bill 5078. This is the Firearms Industry Responsibility and Gun Violent Victims Access to Justice Act. Oh, it is 5078. Yeah, 5078. I'm gonna grab my laptop here for a second, or hold on. Well, maybe I'll talk about these bills, then I'll grab it all, but this is about firearms responsibility. This is about the market, that they are responsible in the marketing and manufacturing, that they should not be marketing these things to children. They should also be extra responsibility in their inventory controls, making sure that none of these guns are actually stolen or gone from their inventory and stock, as well as the way they market it. Are they marketing it so that a legal gun becomes an illegal gun because they're telling people you can do this and it can do this. And it can suddenly fire more bullets or be more harmful to people. As well as, right now there's a federal law. That's why I went to my laptop, because that's where I remembered the federal law was, that prevents a federal right of action, that prevents families from suing on a civil remedy. But this particular law would allow the Attorney General to sue based on the Consumer Protection Act, as well as public nuisance, as well as allow families to have a civil remedy if they are violating and not responsible, if the firearms, basically the people who are selling and manufacturing are not responsible. There was a case in the early 2000s with the DC sniper, in which the weapon was stolen from Bullseye, Tacoma, from a place in Tacoma. The families were able to sue because it was found that there were hundreds of missing guns from that particular store, and 17 people died from that. And the families were able to sue, and it was $2.5 million. And for this particular bill, it is about putting some responsibility and accountability to the firearms industry, and so that they regulate themselves and provide some of the safety measures that are needed for our community. And again, that bill is Senate Bill 5078. That is the moving bill. The companion bill is 1150. And, yep, 1130 with Rapakni. I got to zoom in to my cell phone a little bit more. Yes? House Bill 1130 is the companion, but the moving bill, the one we're all focusing on, is Senate Bill 5078. Senate Bill 5078, prime sponsored by Senator Jamie Peterson. The last bill gun responsibility bill that we have on the FAN agenda, it is House Bill 1143. This is prime sponsored by Liz Berry. This is the moving bill. When I say moving bill, it's like, what are you talking about, right? It is the one that's going through the hearings, that is taking all the actions and will likely pass and then move to the other chamber. We'll move to the Senate or we'll move to the House. And so this is where all the actions is taking place right now. So that's House Bill 1143. And you can always look it up online and where the bill is at. Or you can also look at our bill tracker. This is requiring more, I would say, permits to purchase firearms. The permitting process, a 10-day waiting period, requiring people that are buying these new guns to actually get training. This would probably save some people's lives, maybe their own or others. And that they have to go through a background check by the State Patrol. So there's additional measures in order for a person to purchase a gun. Right now, if you wanted a shotgun, you could get it this day. There's only certain guns that you do have a waiting period for. I remember this during the pandemic because there were people who were kind of afraid and fearful, and they were gunning guns. But I was like, really? You could just get it right like that? One person testified that maybe they could have helped their husband because they did not know that they were suffering from a mental illness, and he got a gun that day. He got a shotgun that day and killed himself. So it's not just about mass shootings, but it's also preventing someone from self-harm that may have just needed that 10 days or take an evaluation or whatnot, a background check. And so these bills are really to ensure that we are safe, that that manufacturers aren't selling to people that they know. Like basically that they're taking measures. With a firearms responsibility, it's like you're taking measures to make sure that you're not selling to gun traffickers or straw purchasers, that you are taking some initiative rather than just letting the community or law enforcement figure it out. So that's the trio of the gun responsibility bills. And that has been very intense and likely will be the fight of the legislature and is looking like more of a bipartisan fight. I would say partisan fight. Like the gun responsibility bills of last year that passed by bipartisan lines. I would say the Democrats did increase their lead this year, 58-40 in the House, and I believe 29-20 in the Senate. But that doesn't mean you need everyone. Yes? What's your question? Sure. The ban to assault, ban of the sale of assault weapons, that doesn't mean possession, because if you've already owned one, that would still be legal. This is the ban on the sale of future assault weapons. It is House Bill 1240. That's the one that's currently moving. And then the companion Senate bill is Senate Bill 5265. 5265. Oh, yes. No one will be taking away their guns. If you've already owned one, no, they're not. The government is not taking it away from you. But it is about the happening in the present and the future, and likely it is to prevent more of these assault weapons getting into young people's hands, more like young men's hands, because of the mass shootings. Alice. 1140. Yes. House Bill 1143 is the permit to purchase firearms. That the prime sponsor is Rep. Berry. In the Senate, the companion bill is Senate Bill 5211, with Senator Marco Leas as the prime sponsor in the Senate. So there are champions for this in both the House and the Senate. They're pretty strong champions, and they're going to fight for this. And I do believe that all of these will likely get a floor vote. So this is about really pushing your legislators to vote for it, because it'll likely get to the floor vote. When I say that, because sometimes things don't even get to the floor. Either they never pass Rules Committee, they never pass the fiscal, but likely these bills will get that. So every single legislature that you meet with, please tell them to vote yes. And then, oh, go for it. Sure, we wouldn't be likely the first to impose more, I would say, permit process to guns. Other states have, although there have been people who said that it may be unconstitutional. So this will be, even if this, there were a lot of testifiers who did that, and they're going to bring this, they're going to sue. And they're going to sue Bob Ferguson, and Bob Ferguson says he's ready. So this will likely go up to the either Ninth Circuit or whatnot. But we aren't the first. In terms of the firearms responsibility, there is a federal law. That's why our families of Washington State could not sue. But under that federal law, it did give states the power to do it themselves, if they should do it. Was there another question? Oh, okay. Now, the other one I wanted to briefly touch on was the missing and murdered Indigenous women and persons cold case unit. This fortunately has bipartisan support, like our alert last time, like the Amber Alert for MMIW. If you hear that, that's missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. They have the highest demographics of violence and murders. And this cold case unit would be basically, there would be a prosecutor and investigation unit in the AG's office, and there would be special care to this because they just have this increased number. This, fortunately, like I said, has bipartisan support and will likely pass. It just needs the floor vote. The next one I wanted to touch upon was, and this is, I will say, the House bill for the MMIW cold case unit is House Bill 1177 by Representative Deb Lekanoff. She is an Indigenous, she's of Indigenous ancestry, a representative. And then also in the Senate is Senate Bill 5137, Manka Dhingra, and she's the chair of Law and Justice. So this bill has very powerful champions in the legislature, likely will pass. The moving one is the House bill with Deb Lekanoff, Representative Lekanoff, 1177. You've noticed that with House bills, they often start with the ones, and the Senate bills often start with the fives. The Senate bill for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People Cold Case Unit is Senate Bill 5137. The prime sponsor is Senator Dhingra. It's just a good reminder for our legislators to know that we care about these issues. Yes. And the last one I'd like to talk about before handing it off to Leslie is the Bias Incident Hotline. This is House Bill 1410 with Rep. Hansen and Senate Bill 5427. I testified at the Senate bill because that's the moving bill. Let's see here. And that would create a centralized statewide biased incidents hotlines. As you know, we've have increased hate crimes and bias incidents in Washington state. It has grown through the pandemic, especially towards Asian and Pacific Islanders. But what surprises people when I tell them is that the second most likely besides perceived race, ethnicity, 20% in 2019 was due to religion. And in fact, in 2021, I saw a lot of it in my area in Tacoma, in which a lot of churches, even our mosque was burned down, the only mosque in the county, the Islamic Center of Tacoma. So there has been some attacks on people of faith and whatnot, and a bias incident hotline would provide better tracking, data, and it also provides resources. So as we know, bias incidents tend to turn into hate crimes. So we want a better tracking of that, as well as before it escalates, we want our government and law enforcement, and for all of us too, to get involved, for our communities to get involved. And with that, I'll say the House bill and Senate bill again, because it seems like I seem to miss that. House Bill 1410 and Senate Bill 5427 for the Bias Incident Hotline. I would also like to mention that this has already been done by Oregon, and they're seeing success with this, having a centralized hotline, as well as seeing better data tracking and providing resources for those that have been targeted. And I'd like to pass it now to Leslie Cushman from the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Can you hear me? Okay, so I know many of you because I worked on Initiative 940, and I know Lauren, and I know Anila, and I know other people. I know Mike in here, so if I don't recognize you, I want to thank you for that, because that was just a life-saving, state-changing piece of work that we did with the signature gathering and then getting it all passed. So thank you for that. I'll give you a little background. After 940 passed, what our coalition did was do extensive work on implementation of the law. That's one of the values that we bring, is you don't just pass a bill, you got to make sure that it's understood and there's work. So when these bills that Kristen told you about and you're learning about, remember there's work that happens afterwards, and you can get engaged in that. It's really important work, comments and meetings and coming to the table. So it's not done after it passes. And we also know that it's hard to get a bill introduced, then it's hard to get a bill to get a hearing, and then to get a bill moving. And so the bills we're talking about today are actually alive and have a chance to get enacted. So that's very important. The Washington Coalition for Police Accountability is centered on families who've lost loved ones to police violence. That is our governance. That's the lived experience we rely on. And I actually wish someone was here today with me, but they would have to get on the freeway and come to Olympia, and they're actually in meetings, virtual meetings today with legislators. So I'm here I'm their backup, and that's my role here. I'm sort of a staffer when we think about how the work is done at the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. We have a number of really important bills this year. I'm going to tell you about them, and they all relate to our mission to reduce police violence and increase police accountability. You know that in 2021, there was 14 bills passed at the legislature addressing policing as a profession. And we've heard that was enough, we're shutting the door, you're done. And I'll tell you that before 2021, police were essentially unregulated or self-regulated, okay? So that 14 was just a beginning. There's a lot more work to do. And when we see things like what happened in Memphis to Mr. Nichols, We can't point over there and say that's happening there. That could easily happen here, and it has happened here, and it is happening here. So we're working on that, and our bills to do that add two important features to accountability, and I'm going to write my numbers down here. So House Bill 1025 creates a state private right of action for victims and families of police violence, and it is a way to get around qualified immunity. So our Supreme Court, I guess it was a Court of Appeals, has said, so this statement I'm making right now is not about qualified immunity, it's about our Constitution. Our Washington State Constitution is more protective than the US Constitution. But our courts have said until the legislature gives us an implementing law, so puts something that gives it some life, we can't go to court under our state constitution. Anil, you're an attorney. You're an attorney. There's other attorneys in the room. That's kind of funny, right? Steve, you're an attorney. So we need House Bill 1025 in order for families and victims of police violence to be able to sue for violations of their constitutional rights. This bill has been introduced by Representative Tai, and it's co-sponsored by Julia Reed, and it has maybe 16 other sponsors. We sent a letter this morning to the Committee on Civil Rights and Judiciary. It's going to pass tomorrow out of the committee, and it came up for a vote last Friday, and they didn't have enough yes votes among Democrats. So the last week we have busted our buns with pressure, and if Kristen wants to share the letter I just sent to this committee with, it shows you the breadth of support for House Bill 1025. 53 organizations in the state representing thousands and thousands of Washingtonians are supporting this bill. There's a substitute on the bill, and we support that. We've had to make some compromises. Y'all understand compromise. You compromise until you don't recognize the bill anymore. One of the things that I tell myself, this proposal they're asking us to accept, would I think it was a good idea if I just saw it and didn't know about my other bill? And sometimes that's what I use as a measure. Yeah, that's a good idea. We can live with that. Other times I ask us to take too much away from our proposals. So there's a substitute, and we are in favor of it. It leaves the protections for the Constitution in place. The bill that is introduced it had a phrase that said under the state constitution and Washington laws. That Washington laws was too broad for people, so we've specified two laws. One of them is the Keep Washington Working law, which many of you know about, and the other one is the use of force law. So violations under the state constitution or Keep Washington Working or the new model use of force law, which is RCW 10-120-020. So that's House Bill 1025. We need you to keep pressure up. It's going to House Appropriations next. I think the fiscal ask is going to be around $5 million. The money isn't the issue. That's not very much money. And if they say it's a lot of money, say all that money represents liability and risk from misconduct, right? That's what the fiscal note in this bill represents. It's the size and shape of police misconduct. So that's House Bill 1025. It does not have a companion bill in the Senate, but you can talk to your senators about it and say it's coming over. We hope this is the year for this bill. It was introduced in 2021 as House Bill 1202. It has changed considerably. We sat down with the cities. Local governments are opposed to this bill because it allows them to be sued. And it doesn't have any individual police officer won't be liable. They'll be indemnified. So when you hear about you don't want to sue officers, well, they're indemnified. So they're not going to lose their homes, they're not going to lose their car. Don't worry. They might lose their jobs because of discipline for misconduct, but that's the consequences. That's what accountability is about. Then we have House Bill 1445 is absolutely fantastic. It passed out of Civil Rights and Judiciary last Friday. It gives the Attorney General's office and strengthens their authority to do investigations of systemic misconduct at police agencies. And actually, we heard today, meeting with governor's staff, that the governor kind of likes that idea. And I'll tell you what he doesn't like when we get down to another bill, and it's where we're going to have to come up with some pressure. So House Bill 1445, it was sponsored by Representative Drew Hansen. Any questions about that? It's just a great bill. House Bill 1445. So you know that some of you are familiar with the Seattle consent decree. There was a consent decree in Yakima. There was one in Spokane. There's been investigations in Vancouver. The Department of Justice at the federal level has the authority to investigate patterns and practice of police misconduct. And this gives a similar authority to the Attorney General's office. House Bill 1445, it's about systemic misconduct and systemic, so if there's been lots of discipline, lots of uses of force, let's say the city of Auburn, where Jesse Saray was killed by Officer Jeff Nelson, and others were killed by Officer Jeff Nelson, and he probably had 60 instances of abuse and violence. That would be, we would say to the AG, we think you ought to go in, or they will know because people have sent them complaints and investigate, and then they can hold them accountable. They can suggest training, they can do injunctions, they can do all sorts of remedies at the police leadership level instead of individual level. Culture starts at the top, and this is really the goal of House Bill 1445. It's a great bill. The next bill I want to talk about is House Bill 1513. It has been sponsored by Chapala Street. He's from the 37th, I believe, and he is enthusiastic about this bill. This ends traffic stops for non-moving violations, like expired tabs, maybe a one tail light out, and it also ends something called consent searches. A consent search is a search that an officer cannot do unless you consent. And when someone says, "Can I search your car?" you're kind of intimidated, and this ends that for these secondary stops. It turns non-moving violations into a secondary instead of a primary stop. And it actually is a huge piece of our package to address profiling and racial disproportionality. It's very important. It passed out of the House Committee on Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry this morning. There was one vote against it, and it was very partisan. All the Republicans voted against it, and Senator Ramos voted against it. People need to talk to Ramos. It's next. There is a lot of pushback from law enforcement who say this interferes with their ability to fight crime. And there's absolutely no connection between crime and these low-level stops. Drunk driving and distracted driving is a big issue, and they're claiming that 8% of the stops they make for non-moving violations are drunk drivers, but 92% of drunk driving is caught by other traffic. So 92% is good enough. We don't have to be 100% perfect on this. Stops for non-moving violations are pretextual stops, typically. They're profiling. Lauren and I know Sonia Joseph, whose son Giovanni was killed in Kent in 2017. Giovanni was 19 years old. He had a license plate that I think it maybe had been an expired tab, which is a classic stop. They pulled him over. He's African-American male. He had a car full of people that looked just like him. And he had done nothing illegal, and he was unarmed. He was a community college student, and he left the scene slowly. He left the scene, never breaking the speed limit, using his turn signals. The officers boxed him into a cul-de-sac and killed him. And his mother and the state has got a settlement from the city of Kent for over $4 million. So it would address stops like that. You wouldn't be able, other ways to get compliance for expired tabs and Robert? Well, one of the things this bill does, it does three things. It says that you no longer can you, so it doesn't make these expired tabs legal. All of these non-moving violations are already infractions. They're not crimes anyway. So let's make that distinction right there. So these low-level violations are just infractions. And it sets up a fund, a grant fund, to help people pay their tabs. We think it's it's a financial issue. So that's the answer. It sets up a grant fund. Right. Right. Yeah, this is sensible. I have 2 minutes. I have to get to the last bill. So that's, the next bill is 1579, and it is creating an Office of Independent Prosecution. And it's been very controversial. What we want and what many advocates want is a bill that provides exclusive jurisdiction to the Attorney General's office. And we've been told that is a risky legal proposition. It won't withstand a constitutional challenge. And we actually spent a ton of money on a legal analysis, but the advice from the Attorney General's office to their client, the legislature, is it's too risky to grant exclusive jurisdiction, and we're trying to get the local prosecutor out of the business of trying officers for use of deadly force. Right now we're supporting House Bill 1579, which keeps concurrent jurisdiction, but it has lots of what I'll call mitigation and mechanisms to get the local prosecutor out of the business. We'll see where that goes. Right now we're supportive of it, and we hope that we can continue that way. We're working with Monica Stonier, who's been incredibly generous with her time and listening, and we appreciate her very much. I want you to oppose House Bill 1071. It might be dead, but it's about school resource officers. We're also working on 1586 and 5533, which are work groups for vehicular pursuit. We're opposing rolling back the vehicular pursuit law, that rollback is House Bill 1363. And Robert, maybe that's when you think about scofflaws eluding the law, but the current law is put in place because vehicular pursuits are inherently dangerous. They kill innocent people, they're reckless, and the best practice in law enforcement is to limit them to violent crimes, sex offenses, DUIs, and escapes, and that's what our state law does. You can go on our website and find all sorts of information, and I think my time is up. We have a question. Ramos is, and Lisa Callan, what is that? He's the fifth? Yeah. He's from North Bend area, Issaquah area, right there. Okay, good.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize again to take a look at the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability site. I'll say it again, Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, WCPA. So if you Google that, you will find the data about vehicular pursuits, plus slides, as well as all of the 4 bills that Leslie said with the one-pagers on there. So it's right, if you go down, slide down a little bit more on the 2023 priorities, if you can, Severin, you can just click on those and it'll say everything that Leslie, it'll put more details because we don't have enough time, but it'll be right handy for you when you want to learn more about it or